According to Bev Friedman, organizational learning occurs when the organization, through the shared knowledge and experience of individual members, collectively comes to understand concepts, processes, events, structures, and culture to make meaning and develop, or not develop, collective wisdom to act, change, react, or ignore. Bowman and Deal have developed a four-frame model offering four distinct lenses or frames through which leaders can think about situations. By examining problems in more than one way, leaders can develop plans of action and strategies for organizational learning and school improvement. These four frames are the structural, human resource, political, and symbolic. The central concept of the structural frame involves roles, goals, and policies. The human resource frame focuses on needs, skills, and relationships. The political frame involves power, conflict, competition, and politics. The symbolic frame addresses culture, meaning, metaphor, ritual, and ceremony. Bowman and Deal argue that while leaders may have a particular frame that they prefer to view problems through, research demonstrates that the ability to use multiple frames is a consistent correlate of effectiveness, and those effective organizations rely on multiple frames. But regardless of the frame through which leaders are viewing problems, effective leaders should consider some of the keys and barriers to organizational learning. According to Jean Johnson, trying to make people do things differently rarely succeeds. Progress comes when people recognize the need for change and believe that they themselves can play an essential part. So how can leaders ensure that all staff feel that they have an essential part to play in organizational change? Grattan and Erickson demonstrate that strengthening an organization's capacity for collaboration requires a combination of long-term investments in building relationships and trust. According to Odell and Grayson, one barrier to the transfer of knowledge within an organization is the lack of relationship between the source and the recipient of knowledge. The absence of a personal tie, credible and strong enough to justify listening to or helping each other, often stands in the way of transfer of knowledge and learning. Hargraves and Fullen tell us that a combination of push, pull, nudge will move systems forward. Pushing someone who's reluctant without being too pushy, pulling or drawing people in, and nudging or guiding. This requires much more skill than first appears, and effective leaders know that this will only work with trust and relationship at the foundation. So how can leaders develop relationships within their organizations, with individuals, and with the group? Hargraves and Fullen tell us that capital is something that adds value to net worth. If you want to get a return, you need to make an investment. Asking people to change their way of thinking or being often involves taking a great risk for people, and in order to ask them to put themselves in the situation where they feel vulnerable and exposed, leaders must have enough credit to do so. Think of it like a bank account. You must make deposits before you can expect to make a withdrawal. One of John Hattie's mind frames focuses on relationship, and he tells it that there has to be a high level of trust before someone will say, "I have no idea what you're talking about." So how can we develop relationships needed for people to take risks and to move forward with change and organizational learning? According to Swift and Huang, without trust and sharing of knowledge, there is no organizational learning, since such learning is premised on willing cooperation and sharing in achieving organizational goals. Swift and Huang define trust as the willingness of an individual to put oneself in a position of potential vulnerability to someone else. Trust is a variable that is dependent on how one perceives one's interests may be enhanced or jeopardized by others in the network, and also in the knowledge transfer process. According to Horsager, one of the biggest mistakes a leader can make is to assume that others trust him simply by virtue of his title. Trust is not a benefit that comes packaged with the nameplate on your door. It must be earned, and it takes time. As a leader, you're trusted only to the degree that people believe in your ability, consistency, integrity, and commitment to deliver. Horsager argues that leaders can earn trust over time by building and maintaining these 8 key strengths. Clarity. People trust the clear and mistrust or distrust the ambiguous. Be clear about your mission, purpose, expectations, and daily activities. When a leader is clear about expectations, she will likely get what she wants. When we are clear about priorities on a daily basis, we become productive and effective. Compassion. People put faith in those who care beyond themselves. Think beyond yourself and never underestimate the power of sincerely caring about another person. People are often skeptical about whether someone really has their best interest in mind. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you is not just an old saying, it's a bottom line truth. Follow it and you will build trust. Character. People notice those who do what is right ahead of what is easy. Leaders who have built this pillar consistently do what needs to be done when it needs to be done, whether they feel like doing it or not. It is the work of life to do what is right rather than what is easy. Contribution. Few things build trust quicker than actual results. At the end of the day, people need to see outcomes. You can have compassion and character, but without the results you promised, people won't trust you. Be a contributor who delivers real results. Competency. People have confidence in those who stay fresh, relevant, and capable. The humble and teachable person keeps learning new things and doing things and stays current on ideas and trends. Arrogance and a been there, done that attitude prevent you from growing, and they compromise others' confidence in you. Connection. Trust is all about relationships, and relationships are best built by establishing genuine connection. Ask questions, listen, and above all, show gratitude. It's the primary trait of truly talented connectors. Commitment. People believe in those who stand through adversity. Commitment builds trust. Consistency. In every area of life, it's the little things done consistently that make the big difference. Along with trust goes relationship. And Richard Lavoie has a great analogy that I like to use in all relationships. It involves poker chips. In his video, When the Chips Are Down, Richard addresses self-esteem in kids with learning disabilities, but it's a great analogy to borrow for all relationships. Think of self-esteem as poker chips. If you have a lot of self-esteem, you have a lot of poker chips. When good things happen to you, you get more poker chips. Some are born with lots of poker chips, and they continue to get more and more their whole life. They're smart, successful, popular, good things happen to them, and then they get more and more poker chips. They lose some now and then, but they have a lot in reserve. Change is not as risky or scary for people who have a lot of poker chips. But then there are others, people who have very few poker chips. Some start out with less, and some just lose too many along the way. Bad things happen to them, and they lose more and more chips. They have so little left that they can't afford to risk losing the few they have, so they avoid change, they avoid risk, and they keep their poker chips really close by. So how can you give poker chips? How can you do this as a leader? Well, you make a big deal out of the things that people do best. Be a talent scout. Everyone has things they do well. Find out what those things are and give poker chips. Give as many as you can. Find ways for people to earn poker chips, individually and in a group. The more poker chips someone has, the more likely they are to risk losing some in the vulnerable position that's associated with change. Bowman and Deal's 4 frames each provide different ways of examining and addressing barriers for organizational change. In the structural frame, loss of direction, clarity and stability, and confusion could present challenges for growth. In the human resources frame, anxiety, uncertainty, and a feeling of incompetence could be problematic. In the political frame, disempowerment and conflict between winners and losers could be the issue, while in the symbolic frame, loss of meaning and purpose or clinging to the past present. Regardless of which frame we're looking at, identifying and implementing strategies to address these barriers requires effective leaders to have the ability to develop positive, trusting relationships with all people within their organization. We've learned from Fullen the importance of choosing the right drivers for whole system reform. We know that leaders should be using groups to accomplish a learning culture. We need to approach the solution as a social capital proposition to build the teaching profession. But this requires building collaborative cultures within and across schools. As school leaders, we cannot do this without developing positive, trusting relationships. I believe that relationships are the key to organizational learning and that effective leaders understand and demonstrate this consistently. Thank you.